Hey Steph, it's good to see you.
Hey Nikon, good to see you too, my friend.
All right, so I want to jump right in. So welcome to our your Inner Power series, and I'm really loving this conversation. And each time we record one, I see so much more about the nature of mind, consciousness, and thought. And so for context, for people who are joining in on this session, is in the last conversation, we explored where stress comes from, where overwhelm comes, and where burnout comes from, and why you don't really need to suffer from it, even with a busy life. In this session, I wanted to explore with you our natural state. A lot of people say our natural state is ease, grace, and flow. And I'm really curious to know is how can we be more in touch with our natural state regardless of outside circumstances? And with that little question, I'm going to throw this over to you, Steph.
Yeah, that's just a tiny little starter for me, isn't it? I love I love this question. And I think I'm going to start by kind of going back to the very basics of what we talk about in our programs, what we explore with people is it's very simple, really. There are two two different aspects to what we call this understanding that make all the difference in people's lives. The first one is, do we know where our experience of life is coming from, where our moment to moment reality is being created? And the other aspect is that we have an innate ability, our natural state has an innate ability to solve any problem, to create anything we want, to enable our lives to be deeper, more profound, more rich, our experience of life to be more miraculous instead of a grind. So I want to say that in today's world, we don't realize that our natural state of mind is one of peace, ease, flow, creativity, love. We don't know that. Why don't we know it? Because we have learnt, we have misunderstood the way the mind works. We have created a reality for ourselves where we believe what our mind is telling us in every moment. And so what happens is our minds tell us, you need to hurry up, you need to sort out, you're not good enough. We won't be able to we won't be able to figure this out. We need to work harder. All those messages that our mind is giving us comes from the culture of today's world, where we're just being bombarded with information, and that information coupled with the conditioning that each one of us has from when we were a baby up until now, the the script that we're given that says you're not good enough, you're not rich enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not successful enough, those layers and layers of conditioning over the years become our reality. They become what we see when we look out into the world. We look through the perception of this limited being that has all these problems. And I'm going to say that, you know, there are some of us that have confidence. You know, we have pride in our abilities, but there is, in my view, for everybody, there is an undercurrent of limiting beliefs that stop us from trying life out, that stop us from doing things that we would like to do, but we don't believe we can. I don't care how successful you are in life. I think that is something, a misunderstanding that comes with the package. So when we begin to understand that, when we begin to see that we are not our conditioning, we are not our limiting beliefs, we are not this prison that we build ourselves. We are more. We have the potential to do so much more. And the key to that is seeing how we limit ourselves, is seeing how we think of ourselves through the eyes of our conditioning. Really creates the fear that stops us. When we see that, even if we just get a glimpse, when we catch ourselves feeling anxious and fearful and not moving forward with something that we'd really like to do, we allow ourselves a little bit more bandwidth, you know, a little bit more freedom of mind. And what's really cool is that it doesn't take much, but our built-in design is to bring us back to natural, to take us away from the hamster wheel of normal, what we think of as normal, and bring us back to natural. And the experience of coming back to natural, coming back to neutral, with a freedom of mind, means that we have access to all these inner resources that we use on a regular basis, but we don't realize what it is. We don't realize that there's a guidance system. There's an intelligence behind life that is pointing us in the right direction. So when we come back to neutral, even if it's just for us a minute or so, when we can step back from the noise in our head, when we can see what's happening in our head and step back from it, we have all this incredible creative capacity, all this possibility and potential. We rise to the occasion from that place. And I think that's probably one of the most powerful realizations we could have. Talking about realizations from that neutral place, from that natural state, we have much deeper insights about whatever challenges we're up against, or whatever we want to create in life. And insight is what creates change, nothing else. It is purely insight that can move us forward. I'd love to hear your take on that, Nikon.
That's a great question, Stef. And what occurs to me is a meeting that I had today with a potential new client, and he is a really seasoned founder, means he started a lot of businesses, very successful, and is thinking about becoming a coach, and is really excited about his personal development journey. He's reading a lot, he's learning a lot of new techniques and tools. And what occurred to me in our conversation was that he was doing all these things to get to his natural state, and techniques and tools, and learning about his inner child and his past. And what occurred to me to say to him is, he's already okay. And as you were sharing, it occurred to me that's what I was pointing to, because if your natural state exists before circumstance and not as a result of circumstance, then at some level of consciousness or understanding, your natural state can't be affected, can't be the result of your circumstance. So, which means to me, in my logical brain, that ease, grace, and flow is always available to you, regardless. And as I pointed out, he began to talk about, right, that makes sense. And right now, I'm really trying to love myself more, and I'm trying to be more lovable. And then again, this insight occurred to me, but if you know who you really are, and who you really are is made of love, you can't fill that cup. That cup is perpetually filled. And I think I was saying that more for myself too, and realize in that deep realization that if you're made of love, it doesn't make sense to try and be more lovable, because you already are made of love. And we only create limits or live in a way where we think we're unlovable, but that doesn't change the truth that you are unlovable, of who you really are, and how your natural state is always available to you. And it's funny when you think about it, because you're saying that it's almost like the way people talk about natural state now. It's like something to be achieved. Like if you meditate for so and so hours, and then you can have this natural state thing. If you live healthy and clean, then you get to earn this natural state and this state of mind. And I remember competing in Taekwondo, and like my most quietest, I felt my natural state was fighting people in combat, in physical combat, where some people might think that was really stressful, but to me, it was really quiet, because my whole body was focused on this other person in this combat dance that we were doing in Taekwondo. And as you were sharing, what occurred to me that, wow, it's a completely different game than trying to improve my conditioning. Like, oh, if I just need more positive beliefs, I need to swap out my limiting beliefs for positive beliefs, and then I'll have more of this natural state stuff. And again, this goes back to this conversation that I was having with this gentleman, and I realized you you don't need better conditioning. You just need to know you have conditioning. And we both saw it. He was like, whoa. And then I was like, whoa. And I realized that's it. You just need to know or be aware of the conditioning you're living under, and then you're free. And then, as I love what you're sharing, how your system self-corrects and self-navigates the moment you take your hand off the wheel and you let it go. Because in truth, maybe another conversation for another day, that you are also the wheel, right? Like you're not the pilot, you're the plane. And so the moment you stop trying to make it better, the plane self-corrects and goes on autopilot, which is naturally aligned with our natural state, which is ease, grace, and flow. And to me, in working with founders, what I saw was the people who own businesses or in the tech startup industry is that they're so far removed from the natural state and they're trying so hard to get back, not knowing that it's right there inside of them all
Mhm.
along.
Mhm.
And what's on offer, what's available that comes from living in alignment with your natural state is a guided life, is a wonderfully, powerfully guided life that goes from moment to moment. And if I may share further, I was having another conversation with a colleague who was stressed about money and they were concerned about the numbers in their bank account and how they really had to create plans to secure the next 10 years financially. They had enough, they need enough more money in the bank account to feel better about the next 10 years. And as he was talking, what occurred to me, and I said it to him, like, if I may, I said, I think you have an opinion of how much money you think you're going to make over the next 10 years. And the truth is, you have no idea what's going to happen. So to over prepare and overthink for something you have no idea what's going to happen, it just doesn't make sense to me, Steph. And I saw how when we come back to the present moment and really live in alignment with our natural state, it's all taken care of. And like you said, the solutions will show up, the people show up. I think Sid Banks said, he doesn't care that if you're in the middle of the desert, when it's time to know what you're meant to know, someone will show up and point you in the right direction. And with that, I'd like to pass the ball back to you.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you said about how, when we feel overwhelmed, when we feel that we need to be better, when we feel that we need to learn something new and meditate or whatever it is. I think to me, it's so much more simple and so much more elegant and graceful than that. I think when we're looking to add to what we already have, when we need more, when we need to be more, it just adds to the weight of the thinking that we have.
Yeah.
I love the fact that the way that we are designed is we don't need more. Basically, the layers of conditioning that we have, the layers of beliefs about ourselves, the idea is to strip those away. The idea is to see them for what they are and allow them to just kind of slip off. And what's underneath that is our natural self. So we don't have to do anything. All we have to do is notice. All we have to do is see when we've got lost in our mental idea of what's happening and who we are.
So I'd love to ask a question to that because I remember facing this myself when I was first started learning about the three principles of mind, consciousness, and thought. And I had a real hard time with this because I came from a world of doing and achieving, and I need to do something about it. And so if I could share what this first sounded like to me in my head was, wait a minute. So if I'm super stressed and overwhelmed, you just want me to sit and do nothing? Like, is that, and just notice my thoughts? Like, is that all I have to do? And looking back now, I realized it looked like that way to me because the thoughts looked real enough for me to want to do something about it. And if I could go back and talk to myself, then I would say, and I'm going to pass this to you, like, what would you say to that person? But for me, I would say, yeah, because when you let yourself settle and you give it a couple hours, this is going to look very different than it does right now. What would you say to someone who is really caught up, who might be um, who might be overwhelmed by their thoughts, or like worried about money or their marriage, or like just really caught up right now, and we're telling them that you don't have to do anything, and they're concerned about not doing anything, what would you say to that stuff?
I think there's the way it looks to me is that when we are caught up in the noise in our head, the content of our conditioned thinking, the content of our ego, there's nothing we can do about that. Okay. But the understanding, when we know that thoughts aren't permanent, when we know, and everybody who asks themselves this question will see that I'm not going to be thinking in a minute, in 5 minutes, in an hour, in a day, what I'm thinking now. Our thoughts are designed to pass through. So when we understand that how I'm feeling now, if I'm feeling anxious and worried and fearful, and I misunderstand what that means, if I think there's something happening in the world that's creating those feelings in me, then it's going to feel like this is always how I'm going to feel. You know, in that moment, we can't imagine not feeling that way when we're caught up. When we understand that those thoughts are kind of designed to come and go, we can hang on to them. We can hold them close and make them even more real. We can think of the worst possible scenario in our head, but even then, at some point, those thoughts will pass through, and we'll be in a different state. That's kind of the way it works. The difference is knowing it. The difference is seeing it. So if I know that I'm caught up now and I really, really can't see the wood for the trees, at some point, I know that I will. I know, because that's the way we're built.
Right. And what I saw in that was, if you didn't know at some point it's going to look different, of course, you're going to try and do everything you can to change what you're experiencing. And I think what's really on offer in this very special episode is, if you know the same way you know your own name, that your natural state exists beyond your thinking, then you don't have to be afraid, because you know there's something you're going to fall back on that's soft and kind and safe. But if you didn't know that, you would do everything you can to survive this fearful experience.
Not only is that available to us, but the intelligence of the design, the kindness of the design, is always trying to bring us back to neutral. Yeah. We can kind of rev it up and get in the way of it, but eventually it will always bring us back to neutral. And there is so much comfort in that. There's so much power in understanding that, because it means we don't have to get so gripped. That our thinking in the moment doesn't have to be so charged, or even if it is, we don't have to make it about anything else other than our own mental system trying to play with us. The other thing I wanted to say your point about loving yourself. For me, it seems to me that we have, we live in a world of our thinking, and most of the time our thinking is informed by the conditioning, is informed by the not good enough, is informed by the scarcity and lack and the need to be better, and the I've never been worthy kind of thinking. That's what the ego does. Now, it seems to me that if we don't understand that the ego is not who we are, then what we end up doing is we end up trying to love the ego. We end up trying to love that part of us that thinks we're not good enough, that is fearful.
And that's just a losing game. Like, you're never going to win that game.
It's never going to happen, is it?
Never going to happen. Never going to happen. And I love that. And gosh, I love that. What I saw in what you just shared, Stef, is if you didn't know you had conditioning and you lived in a world where you're conditioned to think that you weren't lovable, you would look for love your entire life and never find it. Or you'll look for it in all the wrong places, not realizing it was right inside of you. And what I mean is not physically, but in your innate well-being and natural state. And the moment you realize you have conditioning, it just kind of melts away, because there's much more space in your psychological, spiritual being for love to come through for you. And with that said, I'd like to put a pin on it for now. And so in our next conversation, we're going to be talking about how to experience more natural creativity, joy, and inspiration. And before we go, Stef, I'd like for you to share any last things you want to say about our natural state for people who are listening.
I guess what you pointed to when you said, when we have this conversation, people see, they hear there's nothing to do and it's simple and all we have to do is notice. That felt true for me as well. It felt like a passive way of trying to cope with my mental traumas, if you like. And what I've seen is, firstly, when we talk about noticing, to me, noticing is a much deeper, more profound event. So when I'm talking about, when we're caught up in our head, and then at some point we notice that we're caught up, we're not so caught up that we can't see it. The noticing is like a small shift in consciousness. It's like we're lost in the woods, we can't see the wood for the trees, and then all of a sudden, when we notice, all of a sudden we're kind of flying above the woods. We can see ourselves in there, we can see what we're doing to ourselves, and when we see that, we stop doing it.
Yeah. What occurs to me in this metaphor is, on the outside, natural phenomena looks really boring. For example, a bird flying who from standing will flap its wings and all of a sudden be airborne and fly through the sky. What's actually happening in terms of laws of thermodynamics and flight mechanics and physics, you're witnessing ordinary miracles. But from the outside, it looks like a bird, like it's just flying. It's really boring. That's what I heard when you talked, in the way you talked about noticing. On the outside, I'm just noticing my feelings and my thinking. I'm not doing anything. But spiritually, you're shifting your consciousness to a much higher level where you can see more. And that seeing will grant you the freedom you're looking for.
Absolutely,
Or recognizing it's always been there.
absolutely perfect. See what happens when we're caught up,
Yeah.
when we can't see the wood for the trees, we have no resources. You know, we have no bandwidth.
Mm,
We have no way of dealing with a situation until it passes through.
yeah.
Now, when we notice, when we have that shift in consciousness, that shift in perception, it then allows us back into reality. It allows us back into this moment. It allows us back into our natural state. And from our natural state, when we're orientated from our natural state, they use the words right action will occur.
Ooh,
So it's not
really.
like you don't have to do anything. What it is you kind of, when you notice what's happening, when you see how you're caught up, you take a step back. When you take a step back, you touch a deeper space, and the guidance system will do the rest. So it will give you whatever you need to move forward from that place.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Cool. This was such a beautiful conversation, Stef. I'm so grateful that we captured it and we can share it to anybody who needs to hear
Yeah. I really, if people listening just get a tiny glimpse and get curious about what we're talking about, then that's a portal, that's a window and a door to a whole different life. So I'm really excited to hear what people say, you know, what they're seeing.
it. All right. So I will see you in our next part. And until then, take care of yourself and thank you. All right. Bye, Stef.
You, my friend.